What we're going to talk about today in our focus area is state milk pricing systems. And this is part two. The last quarterly dairy legal webinar that we did back in April, I guess it was, covering January through March. We talked about this same topic, and that was part one. This is now part two. If you missed part one, there was more detail, but that's okay because I'm going to just do a recap briefly of that to sort of catch us up and put us in the right frame of mind to finish this out and cover all of the states that have sort of a pricing system of their own. There's 7 of them. And so we did do 4 of them last time, which included Pennsylvania's system, which many of you are very familiar with if you're Pennsylvania attorneys getting CLE or your Pennsylvania residents here attending. And then we talked about Maine, New York, and Virginia. And now we're going to talk about Montana, Nevada, and North Dakota. Now, the reason that we're doing this really is to sort of cover the waterfront on the issues of what other ideas are out there. And some of that is because there has been, of course, a certain amount of examination of Pennsylvania's system administered through the Milk Board, now called the Pennsylvania Milk Board. I have to get used to that. And it's helpful to maybe say, okay, well, what has any other state done? What are some of the options that have been, pursued in terms of a state system that is directly related to, and again, we're sort of bringing this all back to one issue, which is the producer price. And that's why we're looking at this, is to see what people have done about that. And that's why we had the title of this as State Milk Pricing and Supports. We pretty much probably could just say pricing, because it's all, methods of pricing that are in some way, shape, or form modeled in some capacity after what's being done at the federal system. And that's not, exactly, we're not going to go into great detail, just very cursory detail here, just so you get some basic concepts. Okay. By the way, before we go any further, make sure that you put any questions in the Q&A. And I do not see anything in there now, but please go ahead if you do. And I think that's right, although I'm looking and I don't see a Q&A button on here now. I'm only seeing a chat button. Okay, maybe I don't know. Audrey, do they have to put their questions in the chat then? I thought I saw a Q&A button.
It's you just
I see.
Send it out.
Yeah, right. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, okay. All right, of course, you guys know me for probably if you've attended one of these before. That's me there. Here's big reason I put this slide in here is because my email address is here. Send me emails if you want. If you have other questions, you got ideas for other webinars to do or other topics to cover, particularly in this series and this portion, the little focus portion, that'd be great. Dairy legal webinar. There's not as many dairy legal issues as, might be the case, or I'll put it this way. We've been doing this for quite a while. I forget how many Audrey said we have done so far, but it's been a lot. And so, if you have topics that you think are of interest, I'd love to hear them. And you guys know me, most of you, I was in practice in Lancaster County in Pennsylvania here for about 18 years. Then I was at the Department of Ag for about 12 years. And then I've been here at the Penn State Ag Law Center since 2019. So submit some questions if you got them. All right, now, as I said, we're focusing on the producer price, really. So how is the milk producer price set? This is one of the, and again, this is just same things we covered at the introduction last time, but you put it in context. Milk is, one of the few raw agricultural commodities where the price is not established entirely by market forces, and of course the very familiar phrase about, farmers are always price takers, or many times they're price takers. And that's very true here too. There have been the creation of things that have tried to provide some degree of break in that, brick wall, shall we say, of being a price taker. And the federal milk marketing orders are, in fact, one measure that tries to break that down a little bit and provide something for producers that is theoretically designed by producers. And, all of the hubbub when people talk about milk pricing and the federal milk marketing system, you can't lose track of the fact that these are marketing orders that were adopted under federal law by producers. These are all adopted by vote of producers. And of course, we are familiar with that because right now we have just seen the preview of the decision on some federal milk marketing order reform ideas. Not going to talk about that today. And I think it even happened outside of the quarter that we're talking about here, which is the second quarter of 2024, because it just got released here now in the third quarter as we sit. But those formulas, are marketing orders under the Ag Marketing Agreement Act of 1937, which is very convoluted in its legislative history. And also just keep in mind that most states have, and Pennsylvania has one, of course, a statute authorizing the adoption of marketing orders for various, there's a generic one in Pennsylvania for any commodity. And so there are, a number of other marketing orders. In fact, there's even a dairy one. There's Pennsylvania Dairy Promotion Program, which is technically formed under the authority to do that. Now, let me go forward here. Okay, so we're familiar with the federal system, and we have the various federal orders. Of course, they're no longer consecutively numbered because of all sorts of changes that have gone on in the, nearly, someday we'll be at 100-year mark of this system someday, maybe. So this just gives you the U.S. map, as you probably are aware, or if you attended the last one. And so last time we talked about the eastern states over here, we talked about, PA, Maine. Interestingly, of course, they are not in any federal order. No part of the state of Maine is in a federal order. PA has its, portions that are in two different federal orders. And then we talked about New York, which has this Western New York feature that is not in the in a federal order, not in the Northeast order. And then we talked about Virginia, which is similar in the sense that it's got a split there, and part is in a federal order that's price controlled by the federal system, and then some is completely open, not within a federal order. Now we're going to talk about Montana, which you can see is completely like Maine, completely without any federal order applicable. And Nevada, which is the same boat, no federal order whatsoever, and North Dakota, which has a federal order, the Upper Midwest federal order, which really is dominated by Minneapolis and then Wisconsin and here. But in terms of the big population centers close to North Dakota, Minneapolis, St. Paul is really that is the center of population. That's where all the milk gets consumed. Other than, of course, in the Wisconsin, I'm just saying as a direct, contiguous neighbor, shall we say, of North Dakota, and any dairy producers that are in that state. And we talked last time about the federal system, and I basically am really going into generalizations here in not only my description of the federal system, but the state systems. And it's just to give you a flavor of what tools are being used and what sort of modifications and improvisations on those tools are being used currently. And essentially, the part of this federal order system that we want to talk about is that we essentially have these order pools that pool theoretically on paper, it's in the abstract, they pool all the money that is produced by the sale or by the sale from producers to processors of milk that is utilized as either class 1, fluid milk, class 2, the soft dairy products, class 3, cheese, and class 4, powder, and butter. And so all of this is pooled in order to enjoy the much higher price that is paid for the class 1 milk, and has always been processors have always been able to afford more to pay more for class one milk because it's the highest priced commodity out there, and on a per volume basis. And the idea is to instead of everybody just having to take a price, all of these producers who would be over to the left here, feeding their product into the system, which then produces these various classes of products. The idea is, well, when that producer doesn't really have a decision on whether their milk is used for a high price class like 1 or a low price class like 4, then the idea that has been arrived upon and pursued in the federal order system is that let's take the revenues produced by the higher priced milk and share them with everybody and create this order pool, which then in theory creates this uniform producer price at the end of a 1-month marketing period. Goes month by month by month, very intensive in terms of the administration calculations, the math that has to be done. But the bottom line is try to even out that income so that the producers within that marketing area of the order that are contributing to this pool will then ultimately get a uniform price out of the pool, so to speak. It's an accounting nightmare because there is an advance price and then there is a final price. And then, the final price is more or less sort of a truing up process from the advance price, which was announced by USDA earlier. And, the nightmare of the accounting is not what we're here to talk about. The concept is what we're here to talk about. And one thing that I do want to mention before we get to some of the state systems is that, in this diagram, which I have truncated for the simple use in this particular webinar, if you go over to the left, there's all sorts of additional information with regard to how are the prices for these different classes established in the federal system. And we live under a situation which is now what's called component pricing, which is this is like a mess of spaghetti over here with lines going all around, and much complaints and concentration, particularly in the recent reform, about how do you set these prices for these various classes of dairy products or fluid milk, which do create the price disparity, discrepancy, although or the price distinctions. However, those price distinctions are the product of the market. This is an attempt to try to even them out a bit by memorializing them, then creating an order pool, and then coming up with this uniform price. So again, what's the object of the exercise in all of this is to try to spread around the wealth from those who are lucky enough to be having their milk utilized as class 1 and fluid milk versus, let's say, those whose milk gets used for cheese or butter or powder or whatever. Now, of course, we've had some weird situations in the market recently where cheese prices have skyrocketed, which have thrown off the traditional ranking of these prices as to which is highest and which is lowest. That has, messed up the federal system in terms of the way it was envisioned to work, so that the uniform producer price ended up being essentially not what people expected, and what had been years worth of track record or history due to a change that was made. The bottom line is, let's not go there. We'll talk about that in some other time when we talk about the reform. But the traditional idea is class 1 highest, then 2, then 3, then 4, and let's straighten all that out with a pooling system. Okay, so that's the concept of pooling in the federal system. I just want to spend some time on that because we're going to talk about it in the states. Okay, now, so what about state price regulation? If people are dissatisfied with the federal pricing system and too cumbersome, too hard to amend, too complicated, too politically charged, etc., what about, well, just because there's a USDA system, under federal law, of course, there's no federal preemption. State pricing systems can exist. They're generally very difficult to administer sometimes based upon Commerce Clause issues, but that's a discussion for another time. Obviously this is another effort of interference with the market forces that, those who believe in a pure, capitalist system would say the market forces should be dictating, not the government getting involved in this way. Well, we kind of, that train has left the station a long time ago. We've been doing this for decades and decades and decades. Wouldn't state assistance of some kind be a win-win, for state legislators? Well, we'll see. There's 7 of them who have attempted. We talked about 4 of them last time. Now, recap of the other states that we talked about last time. Pennsylvania has this overorder premium. Basically, one other thing before I talk about the overorder premium, Pennsylvania has this area that is not within a federal order. So, if the plant is in the blue area here up in the map, or in the green area up in here that the farm is shipping to, then they're within their milk is going into the federal order. It's being shipped in for processing, so they're included. But if in fact then there are a few plants that are in this unregulated area, so to speak, the first thing that milk marketing board does is it does create a floor, a minimum producer price for these areas that aren't covered by a federal order. Not as big a deal on the East Coast, because these urban centers and the milk consumption and the sort of the infrastructure for moving the milk through the chain, the processing plant, the wholesalers, the supermarkets, the population centers, etc. They're all close enough here that, Pennsylvania's system wasn't necessarily created to fill this gap where there was no sort of minimum producer price from a federal order, because generally those areas were getting the benefit of their proximity to everything that was necessary to have a more robust price: population, infrastructure, processors, etc. So as we see in this Western states, we're going to see that not being a federal order is a big motivator behind some of their systems. Anyway, Pennsylvania has that, but the big issue in Pennsylvania, of course, is the state overorder premium, an extra amount of money that the state mandates be paid to producers for their milk, but only if it's being utilized for class 1. Oops, sorry. Go back for a second. So that's causes some dissatisfaction and is viewed by many as an imperfect state measure, because it leaves the people whose milk is used for class 2, 3, and 4 completely out in the cold with no extra price bump from the state action being taken. This is all about class 1 fluid milk. And and then in order to not to burden the others in the supply chain by the fact that you're compelling an extra payment to the producer, there's a minimum wholesale price that incorporates the fact that money had to be laid out to procure the milk, or at least in theory to procure the milk. We know that it doesn't always work that way, or the minimum wholesale applies to some milk that does not in fact originate in PA, and may not even be retailed in PA. But the bottom line is then there's a minimum retail price, which allows the retailer to recover that extra amount of money that was required by the state government. Excuse me, sorry, I did it again. By the state government in item number 1 here, in this little 3-part minimum pricing scheme. So the idea being there's a recovery of the amount that the state made somebody pay for raw milk to a producer in the retail chain all the way down to the consumer. Again, I know you probably are familiar with this, but just want to go over it again. Leaves all the other classes of milk other than 1 out, not participating in this state benefit. Okay, now Maine, we talked about them. They have a system that is probably the closest one to Pennsylvania's in some respects, but then they do some different things too. But they have a milk commission premium that at the time that we did the webinar was about $1 per hundredweight, and they have a producer margin, another premium that is $1.50 per hundredweight. So $2.50 added on essentially as a state benefit from the government of the state of Maine. Now, they pay it in two different ways, depending on whether they are somebody who is only shipping to plants that are in the empty area up here or the unregulated area up here within Maine, or if they're the Boston market is being fed. That's the population center, and that's what's being fed by these milk supplies that come from other states up here. And so that's another category. So between the two categories, of producers that you may have under the Maine system, the people that are shipping into Boston, in other words, the Boston market producers who are shipping to a plant within the federal order, they get both of these premiums, and that's it. Now, within those who are shipping to something that is in the unregulated portion of Maine where the federal order does not apply, meaning any plant within the state of Maine, then there's also a little miniature pooling going on just for that milk. And there is a uniform producer price across all class utilizations for just that little piece of milk that is being. So in other words, they borrowed that from the federal system and they said, hey, let's have that. And of course, they're borrowing the federal order prices for this unregulated open area also. And then they're bringing in their own Maine premium. So that they created a little miniature, essentially a little miniature federal order, so to speak. And they do all of the work and the accounting for, what is really a small number of producers. Literally, at the time that I did this, I should not say literally. I know that annoys people. It was approximately 14 producers were in this category, and they do all this work to run a little miniature pooling process just to create a uniform producer price for essentially what is, let's just say, less than 25 dairy producers. The rest of their dairy producers are in the Boston market producers category. All right, New York. They have a similar situation where their unregulated area is Western New York. They have a very, very long history of this Western New York milk marketing area and their order issued under, New York law for marketing orders. And it's administered by the the New York Department of Ag. It doesn't have a separate commission of any kind. And they just run basically, again, a miniature federal market order system right there. I should say a miniature, a miniature federal order system right here in this Western New York to essentially give them the same benefits, so to speak, and a uniform producer price, through the pooling of the milk revenues from the various classes, and so. That makes a lot of sense and understandable, and of course that's a that's a significant dairy production area, so that's not anything new. Just borrowing the same structure. Now Virginia has a little twist. Virginia's got a state milk commission, but it's all based upon an ability to get a higher producer price if you buy base, or what's called sometimes quota, which is a right to sell a certain volume of milk. And then if if for that volume that you sell, you get a higher a higher price. Now, Virginia's base is only for class 1 utilization. So again, it has the drawbacks of Pennsylvania's system that, it doesn't deal with class 2, 3, and 4. But it does help out. And so you have this concept of the milk commission base that's been created, and these rights are sellable. And then you're basically buying the right for a certain stated volume of milk to get a higher price. And this is just for class 1, however. Now, so we talked about the variables and the things that we've, seen in those states. Now we will go to another state, the other 3 states that we have involved here. Montana, Nevada, North Dakota, all Western states, which is very important to some of the features and what they've done. Western states obviously have a whole different game because they are in parts of the country that, for example, when the original kernels of the ideas that were hatched in the 30s and the 40s, and for the federal milk marketing orders that exist in the East and now, of course, in the West too. But these states were very sparsely populated, and some of them remain very sparsely populated, which means less production, but less demand. Less local people drinking class 1 milk. Now, obviously, Nevada has exploded, and has these giant urban centers now. So it's one that has changed its face, so to speak. Over the years, Montana and North Dakota are still into that general set of circumstances that Western states are with regard to dairy production, which is everything is really far away from everything else. And there are much less opportunities to sell your milk to consumers, to buy milk from producers, and for producers to sell milk to a processor. Just so many, so much less in terms of opportunities for everybody in the supply chain, and much longer distances to move any of the product through that supply chain. Now, Nevada, kind of an interesting story, sort of a state in significant transition. Now, let's talk about Montana first. I put up the map just so you remember. No federal order coverage. Less than 50 total dairies statewide. They actually do publish a map. I didn't want to spend too many pages on this PowerPoint, but there's a map that shows you, exactly and they have a licensing system. So there's licensed dairy farms, and there's less than 50 in the entire state. And now we all know that there is a certain amount of growth going on in the Western states with regard to these giant mega dairies, going out west for various reasons, less environmental and local municipal, hurdles to jump over. Lots of issues going on there that we're not going to get into now. But the point is, as we talk about these Western states, your eyes have to sort of be looking down the field to think about, are these becoming, or someday may become, the sites of some of these mega dairies? Certainly, I know North Dakota, for example, is trying very hard to get into that game because South Dakota has gotten into it. And I'm sure Nevada is exactly the same. I haven't studied exactly the numbers in Nevada, but anyway, Montana has what's called a Board of Milk Control, which is established by a thing called the Milk Control Act, which was a 1935 law. Sounds just like Pennsylvania. But it is located within the Montana Department of Livestock. They do not have a Department of Agriculture. They have a Department of Livestock. Makes me wonder where all the other things are, where all the other statutes and regulatory programs come into play, such as everything that has to do with the growing of crops. Not that is a large crop producer of any kind, or specialty crops, or row crops, etc. Montana is obviously not a large producer, but those must be stashed away in different places in the state government. In any event, the Montana Department of Livestock has this wonderful graphic up on their website that shows you the entire structure of the Board of Milk Control. They give it a nice treatment on their website. Shows you the entire department, and then where milk control sits, and what the duties are, and talks about the board's makeup. Very cool stuff. I'm not going to go into the details except to translate this little fine print that's so hard to read. Basically, Milk Market Administration of this Board of Milk Control under the Milk Control Act. Monthly announcement of minimum prices by class utilization. Okay, we've heard all that before. We know what that's all about. And then we'll talk about why, is there pooling, is there not? Monthly pooling, there you go. There is pooling. And then it says audit of pooling. Of course, if you have a pool, you have to audit the processors and make sure that everybody's getting paid correctly, and that when you have an advance price, and then you have essentially a final price where you're trying to share the proceeds of that pool, then you have an auditing process you have to do to make sure it's being done right. Quota records. Well, there you go. Quota is the same as base, as Virginia used it. So we have a new concept coming into play here. So now, here's the best resource on Montana's system. It's a fiscal year report for 2023. that went to their legislature, I think it is. And that's really where you get the best info on Montana. They have a statewide mandatory federal order like pooling system. However, I put the word mandatory in here. One of the big complaints with the federal order system is that the processors themselves can make decisions with regard to depuling milk. In other words, pulling milk out of that pool. The historical reasons for that are somewhat puzzling to anyone who's just a product of today's, dairy industry, or just because it seems so, it seems so illogical to the makeup of that you would allow processors to essentially take milk out of the pool and unilaterally, essentially, impose upon the producers the lack of control. They become price takers again, because this idea of trying to even out with a uniform price for everybody, no matter what their utilization is, gets completely thrown out the window if milk is withdrawn from the pool. Well, that's a discussion for another time. But Montana's pooling system is just like the federal orders, except it's mandatory. There's no removal of the milk from the pool, which is a pro-producer, measure in today's world. Okay, and it's coupled with a quota plan. So a federal pooling system, very similar to what we talked about before, plus a quota plan. Now, the pool does not create a final uniform producer price. It creates the pot of money from which this quota, is honored. Essentially, it creates the ability for the quota holders to receive a higher final producer price, and so it's a very highly complex system for determining that final producer price. But the bottom line is, for those who hold quota, they share in the revenues from the pool. And it makes it even doubly complicated, because much of the language in the regs and the way it's all set up reverts to a component pricing system, that's not strictly by class. When you are paying out, or you're computing the final price across the entire pool that quota holders will receive. So that gets a little, confusing, and I'll try to explain that a little bit later. But okay, so again, quota akin to the base process or concept that we talked about in Virginia, and now they set the producer price, but but in Montana there is no minimum wholesale retail. Why? Because they don't have a thing like an overorder premium, where they have to, where they have to allow the processors to recover that without damaging their own internal, pricing system that makes them, competitive in the market. Now, here's just an idea or an illustration of, interestingly, in Montana, their class 1 producer price at the if you are a quota holder is it's a lockstep. It's the federal order class 1 price, and that is, I think they borrow that from the Pacific Northwest order that's next to them. Sorry, I should know the answer to that. Plus, they just add $2.55 per hundredweight, and that's the Montana differential, they call it, and it comes up with this per hundredweight price for quota holders of $20.56. Now, here is and that was for June of 2023. Now, this is going to show you that this is pre the Montana differential, but this shows you this is going across to show you from July of 2022 to June of 2023, kind of shows you the pricing and where things were. And the blend price, the quota, I should say, the quota blend, what the pool produces, this quota price is the purple one. So right now in June, a year ago in June of 2023, it was generally where you would expect it to be, which is kind of right in the middle between a class 1 price and the class 3 price. And then here's the class 2 price in here. And so that's, and they combine their class 4 with their class 3, and they just call it all class 3, and as if things aren't confusing enough. That's why there's no 4 on here. But this just shows you here is the blend price, so to speak, that the pool of quota, or that quota holders are entitled to share in, what kind of pricing that produces. It's obviously generally always between the 1 price and the 3 price. 2, jumps up and down. Okay. That's Montana. Nevada, they do not maintain a website. The Nevada Milk Commission does exist. It is a thing, but there is no way to get data from them, I guess, other than to write to them and ask for it or request it by phone, because there is nothing on the internet. So this is really tough. There are 2 marketing orders adopted under the Nevada Administrative Code, and they are administered by the Nevada Milk Commission. There's the Northern Nevada marketing area and the Southern Nevada marketing area. Now, interestingly, the Northern Nevada marketing area, literally, this is the extent of the information that is available online with regard to their pricing. It says right here, the Northern Nevada marketing area has adopted federal milk marketing order in California, which is the newer, the newest one, order 51. And then they have a price differential of 170 with no explanation for that. And then they just refer you over to the California site. Very unhelpful. There is information with regard to the Southern Nevada marketing area, however, from which I could divine some information. And the key document is this pricing justification document right here. Now, this gives you an illustration of what they do. It is essentially again a replication of the federal order system. You know what? I have two. No, that's right. I was thinking I was missing a slide here, but that's wrong. So just to give you an idea, this is. They apparently in the Southern Nevada marketing area, or for the Southern Nevada, marketing order, they rely upon, or the Pacific Northwest marketing order. And the bottom line is, if you just want to see some prices and see what's going on, this is June. This is June. This is June of 24. This is May of 24. This is April of 24. And you can see across here, here's the class 1 price for the Southern Nevada marketing area. Here's the Pacific Northwest's. Now, and then again, it replicates that, and it tells you, what the difference is here. This gives you at least a little bit of an idea as to what kind of results this produces. But unfortunately, we're not in great shape with regard to North Dakota. But what do we learn from all this? Simply that many states, or I shouldn't say many, some states, particularly the West, have just essentially adopted the federal system lock, stock, and barrel with regard to its basic components, let's just say. And what are they doing? Well, they're filling in the fact that they're just completely not in a federal order at all. And so that was, primary and most important motivation for having a state system, not to create something on top of the federal system, just to have something dependable, consistent, that created some type of uniformity where the wealth from class 1 sales can be spread across producers whose milk might go to other utilizations. And then lastly, we have North Dakota. And North Dakota is an interesting story into itself. They've been around since 1967. There's a great historical account. They also have no website, by the way. There's only 24 farms, 24 dairy farms in North Dakota. Whether that increases with all the mega dairies coming out west, we'll see. Part of it's in a federal order. But in any event, they used to be called the Milk Stabilization Board. It was changed to the North Dakota Milk Marketing Board in 1995. Here's the statute that authorizes them. And here are the administrative code sections applicable to each of the marketing areas. This one just describes them. Unfortunately, there's no map. And then there's what they call their plans milk stabilization plans. And if they establish one, actually, they have to establish one. It must include minimum producer prices, among a number of other things. And so here's the links to actually go in there and see the mechanics of it. Again, no website to help you interpret all of that stuff. The point of it all is simply to say that, okay, they do set a minimum producer price for the various classes. And then they have a very significant, federal order like pool system across those 8 marketing areas. And then those are, the areas that aren't in a federal order. And then one of the unique factors that they have is that their class 1 utilization rate, in other words, how much of let's go back to the map for a second, how much of the people that live in this white area, how much of that milk is used for class 1? 87.4% was the statistic that was from the early 2020s. I think I gotta see. I think the year of that was 2022. So no, excuse me, 2020. It was 2020. The end of fiscal year 2020. And so, that's astonishing. Pennsylvania, the class 1 utilization rate is, I don't know, 30, 20 something percent, maybe something like that. And so, that's an interesting statistic to understand, which means that a lot of these people, if they were in this federal order over here that covers the pink area, they would be probably getting a lower price. They benefit by being in that other area or being on their own, so to speak. Now, they do not have any kind of minimum wholesale any type of minimum wholesale or retail pricing at all. Because there's nothing to recover like a mandated premium. It's simply just running a federal order like system, just like we said for some of these other jurisdictions. So that's our status of North Dakota. And if you want to read something interesting about the reasoning behind what's going on in this idea that Minneapolis and St. Paul really control and have a big influence on what goes on in North Dakota, here's a neat little excerpt of that.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Thank you everyone for watching, and hopefully we'll see you maybe tomorrow and later this month. Have a great day.